Hello and welcome to another edition of Volusia County Issues. I'm Crazy Eddie, and with me this morning is Commissioner Donnie Moore. Commissioner, thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you for having me, Eddie.
Today's topic is going to be taxes in Holly Hill. Now, if you don't live in Holly Hill, you still want to stay tuned because it's going to be a pretty informative show. And it's also going to give you some information and some insight into property taxes, where they go, how they're spent, and what can and cannot be done with them. Commissioner Moore, would you like to give us a heads up? You started recently, you kind of dropped a bomb here at Holly Hill when you suggested at the last City Commission meeting that we reduce or eliminate city property taxes. Is that correct?
That's almost correct. The actual motion, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I want everyone to understand out there exactly what the motion on the floor was. The motion was to have our city manager instruct staff to come back to us with ideas on how we can become more efficient in an effort, a long-term goal, if you will, to drastically reduce and or eliminate property taxes. And if I could, I'd just like to explain exactly how I got here and the catalyst that brought me to this issue. I had a 70-year-old woman come to me and ask me what I was going to do about her property taxes, and she lived in Ormond by the Sea. And at first I thought that there was nothing I could do. Because she lived in Ormond by the Sea, I have no authority on any of her taxing districts in that area. And as she told me the story of how her and her husband built a home together in Ormond by the Sea, paid for that home, raised 3 children there, and had a business in Holly Hill for 30 years, and they ran that business together. And her husband had passed away, and all of the property was paid. They did their due diligence, and they made their mortgage payments, and the property was paid free and clear. However, when the economy took a downturn, she found herself in a position that she now was renting her business from the government to the tune of $1,000 a week, or I'm sorry, a month in taxes, roughly around $12,000 a year. She had to close her business. She's now concerned that she won't be able to keep her house over this same issue. And after her story, I still thought, you know, there's really nothing I can do for you. And over the course of a couple of weeks, as I was thinking about this, I thought there is something I can do. I can start the conversation. And so that's what I elected to do, is to look at the property taxes, and I started researching on the history of the property taxes. And the history of the property taxes came in the 1800s. And in the 1800s, it was a time when it really was none of the government's business as to how much money you made. There was no income tax. And we were an agrarian society. We were all farmers. And a good proxy to levy property tax was the size of your property. If one person had a 100-acre farm, good chance that they made more than a person that had a 50-acre farm.
Right.
So at the time, property taxes were kind of just and fair. We're no longer that society. This is a levy that is over 200 years old. And the only thing that we've done to it is we've put Band-Aids on it, and we've made it more confusing with homestead exemptions. And even the homestead exemptions aren't fair, because while you're taxed on a millage rate, which is essentially a percentage, your homestead exemption is a fixed number. So the person with a $500,000 home with the Florida State $50,000 exemption, they receive a 10% tax break or cut, discount. If you have a home assessed at $100,000, you receive a 50% discount.
I see what you're saying.
There's another antiquated, unjust, unfair position on the property tax. And another issue that's even far greater is some of the exemptions that are out there. And I mentioned a property out near the dog track that is it's a cow pasture. It's agriculture. One thing that I did fail to mention is I agree with the agriculture exemption. I understand that our farmers are competing with foreign markets, and if you're a farmer, you should, by all rights, have an agriculture exemption. The problem with this particular property is it is a business of camping for special events. And so while they have a website, and that website is speedweeks.com, speedweekscampground.com, You can go look at Speed Weeks Campground and you'll see the address is 1094. If you then cross-reference that with the property appraisers, 1094 search on the property, 1094 Williamson, and you estimate the taxes are $167.20.
Right.
My point is, here is a multi-million-dollar business that is paying about half of what the average citizen in Holly Hill pays in city tax alone. Now, I am by no means begrudging the person that owns that property or the industry that runs there. The point is, it's the system that is wrong,
right,
and unjust.
Well,
So
let me interrupt you.
Sure, go ahead.
There's something here that bothers me too, and I brought this up many times talking about taxes.
Absolutely.
There is over $1 billion in taxable land value in Volusia County, over $1 billion that's not being taxed because it is a 501c3 property.
Correct.
Over 500 million of that, as a matter of fact, I believe the number is 588 million of that, is to churches.
Correct.
And these churches, not that I'm, not against religion or churches, but however, these churches are using services, same
Sure.
services that the rest of us are.
Absolutely.
And we're having to pick up the balance. So there, I feel is an inequity, an imbalance.
I agree with you, it is. And that's, all of these ideas are exactly why I brought this forward, because I think a responsible government should look at things that are wrong and try to right them and try to correct them. Mm-hmm. I used segregation in my presentation as an example because the reason we don't have separated bathrooms and water fountains based on the color of your skin is because somebody recognized it and said that is just wrong. And until we recognize that the way we're levying property taxes is wrong, it'll never change. And I think that my commission and my mayor took a positive, forward-thinking approach and said, we don't know if we can fix it, but we're willing to recognize it, and we're willing to have our staff come back with ideas so that we can fix it. We're kind of stuck in the mode that, and I had a discussion with a close friend of mine that said, well, if one's house is assessed at more, they should pay more. And what we need to do is we need to rethink what we're paying for, because your property taxes are partially paying for the services you receive.
Right. And
the analogy that I used in my presentation at the commission is, and this is so, there are houses literally across the street from each other that one pays 5 times the property tax of the other one. So using that assessed levy of taxing you based on your assessed value, one could say, well, then it's fair that when the guy with, or the homeowner with the house that's paying 5 times more property tax, when they go to the grocery store, they should pay $15 for a $3 loaf of bread.
But let's explain how that happens too. I mean, here we're going back to the homestead exemption.
Sure.
I bought my home in 1997. I've got a homestead exemption. My taxes cannot go up over more than 3%.
Correct.
The gentleman across the street from me who has an identical property just recently bought the property. He has not enjoyed that homestead exemption since 1997. So his taxes are going to be like triple what mine are.
Sure.
And that's where the homestead, that's where the difference of where you got 5 times more with the guy across the street paying the taxes.
Right, and that also falls into most of your government that doesn't want to look at property taxes, and the first thing that they'll jump on is because they think when you're looking at property taxes that you're saying, well, I want to eliminate property taxes and add a sales tax. And if you notice, I never said how we would do it. I said it needs to be recognized first, and we need to be more efficient. Because in reality, and I'll get back to my point here in a second, but in reality, when you say, well, let's eliminate property taxes, the first question people say is, how do you replace that revenue?
Right.
And really, that's not the first question. The first question is, how do you become more efficient within to reduce the amount of revenue that you have to replace? Then you ask, how do I replace that revenue?
All right, question comes up then, we recently had a city manager who was relieved of her duties.
Sure.
When she came in, she was told, cut the budget, cut.
Correct.
And she did. She did a lot of cutting.
Oh, yeah.
And she cut a lot of jobs.
Absolutely.
And with the way I see it, she made a lot of people angry because a lot of those jobs that got cut were friends of theirs. So she consequently was let go. Now, we were replacing some of those jobs, as I understand it now.
Yes, we are. And I don't think that it was a matter of they were friends of people. I think it was a matter of necessity. If you look at the staffing levels in Holly Hill, we are pretty bare bones. And it cost us money to send people home from the building department and pay an engineering firm to run our building department. It cost us huge money, and we found out in a very short amount of time, it cost us big money. The one thing that I didn't say in my presentation was cut, because I'm not talking about cutting jobs, I'm not talking about cutting services, I'm talking about being more efficient. And when we talk about efficiency, you know, you have to ask yourself, in the state that's called the Sunshine State, have you ever been to a government building that has a solar panel?
Right.
And yet government will tell you, well, solar's expensive. Well, it's nowhere near as expensive as it was 10 years ago. The price is coming down, just like with any other technology. The better the technology gets and the more competitive it gets, the price comes down.
Right.
So my answer to that is, you need to be creative, find the funds so that you can take advantage of these renewable energies and save money forever instead of paying money forever. So I'm talking about being more efficient in energy. I'm talking about being more efficient in spending. If your fire department needs new air packs, you don't just go buy them air packs. You find another department that needs air packs, and you do a joint purchase, and you get it at a reduced cost because you buy a larger volume.
Government efficiency, if government had to run like a business, it would have gone bankrupt 100 years ago. Because
Absolutely.
Government is just, I'll give you an example. I have about a 400-yard road, dirt road, that I have to go through to get to my driveway. Every couple of weeks, they bring in a scraper. They scrape the road. Every time it rains, there's a washout on the side of the road. So now they bring out a crew, 2 or 3 guys or 4 guys.
I know where you're going.
All right. They have spent, since 1997, since I've lived there, they have spent 10 times or more the cost of paving that road.
Absolutely.
In maintenance.
Sure. And that's my point. We can pay now, or we can just continue to pay forever. And one thing that I want to get out before I forget is, a lot of people are under the misconception that your property taxes are your budget. They're a small portion of your budget. They're not your entire budget. So, you know, people get a little nervous in the public, and they think, well, how are you going to run? I had a guy call me and said, you know, how do you intend to replace your entire budget? Well, in Holly Hill, it's roughly 20% of the general fund. It's a little less than the entire budget, but the general fund, it's roughly about 20%. So I don't know about you, but I would like my government to be 20% more efficient.